So, should we bring in the closer?
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 93rd episode of the Free Baseball Podcast presented by the Athletes Hub. As always, my name is Davis Bird, and I'm joined by, I called him the Police Academy look, so Mr. Police Academy, Jake Crumpler. What's going on, big dog?
I don't actually appreciate that relation to the police. Not a big fan, but I'm more of an NWA guy myself, so we'll keep it at that. But I'm surprised that your name hasn't changed after all this time, because it's always Davis Bird.
It's because I'm the one that starts the thing the whole time. Maybe one of these days you can start the whole
third year
thing.
of podcasting. Your name hasn't changed yet?
No. I gotta stay the constant. I gotta stay the constant in this ever-changing world full of Jake Crumpler and his mustache.
True.
Yeah. Weird constants, probably not a thing for spring training because, oh my God, it's been a weird time for baseball with all sorts of injuries and fluctuations and hot starts and really, really cold starts. What are the big takeaways and what are the big interesting storylines from spring training so far, kind of still in the early-ish days of it for you? What's been catching your eye?
As always, there's the unfortunate side of spring training, which is players finally playing at a game level and then either discovering injuries or creating new ones. And that's sort of what we've experienced. It's usually on the pitcher side. It makes the most sense considering they are the most likely to get injured. And also, I don't know, it's just like a really unnatural thing to do to throw that hard. So we've seen a few injuries that are very unfortunate. Lucas Giolito seems to be the biggest one, having been one of the Red Sox biggest signings of the offseason, maybe the only one you can consider to be big. And it looks like he's headed to miss the whole season. He's getting a second opinion, but that would be pretty terrible because that rotation really could not deal with any subtractions, having already traded away Chris Sale and adding Lucas Giolito to replace him. The rotation becomes pretty rocky and unreliable and young, and I'm not totally sure it's going to work out. But yeah, that's very unfortunate to have your first year on a team be just immediately struck down by injury before you even step foot on a field during the regular season.
Yeah, it seems like there's been like a lot of pitcher injuries. Last week we talked about Kyle Bradish and his injury that's going to put him on like the IL to start the season. Now Giolito might be done for the year, and the Red Sox rotation's looking pretty bad on a team that is just looking pretty bad in general. There's a few more that are going to start the season on like IL. Justin Verlander's going to start the season on IL. I think he had a hamstring.
He's just not ramped up all the way.
It might not be. Braxton Garrett also was not going to be on there. He was one that kind of had like a pretty decent season last year for the Marlins. Dauri Moreta is also not going to be there. There's a couple injuries in like the Athletics rotation too. Like I think Luis Medina was is one that had like an MCL sprain or something like that. There's just a lot of names that are kind of hitting the IL or definitely not going to start the season. It's it always sucks to see stuff like that. Because you want everyone to be able to play. Who's like your big stars of of spring training so far that like maybe some prospects that can make a big league team or just old faces that are having a really, really hot start?
Yeah, that's usually what it is young players sort of making a name for themselves their first time on the big stage where everybody's watching. One that's pretty interesting was James Wood. He was absolutely killing the ball. Big prospect for the Nationals, big both in terms of hype and in terms of height. That was a beautiful sentence. Anyway, James Wood was batting really, really well, and he was hitting the ball really hard and far, and that was cool. But I think one of the most notable ones has been former first-round pick Henry Davis, not only first-round pick, number one overall pick of the Pirates just a few years ago. And he made his major league debut last season. It wasn't super crazy, but we really didn't see a lot of him in the minors. So it's warranted that he would need a little bit of time to get up to the speed of major league pitching. And so far in spring training, he's looked completely comfortable at the plate. I think he did a lot of work at driveline and just, simplifying his swing and getting stronger. And you can see it because that home run I sent you in Twitter DMs was crazy. He's just got a beautiful swing from the right side, and he can hit the ball really hard. And the fact that he could be a catcher or an outfielder, I hope he stays at catcher, just considering that provides the Pirates with more value. But they have plenty of depth at catcher that they can afford to use him in the outfield. But Henry Davis looks legit.
Yeah, one of the prospects that I've had my eye on is Chase DeLauder for the Guardians. Kind of a figure similar to James Wood, outfield prospect. He was a number one. He was their first round pick 2 years ago. So in 2022 now, he looks really, really good. And there's a chance with their outfield being super thin, he could just skip AAA and kind of just go straight to it. He's a big batting average guy. And he's hitting like almost 600 so far. Obviously, small sample size, but still, he has been playing really, really well in the spring for them. And then
what about your guy, Owen Casey?
Owen Casey is extremely good. Actually, even last year now, historically, from spring training the previous season, he's hitting almost 500. So through 2 spring trainings, he's been really good. He's going to be probably not starting the season on the roster, but because of their weird outfield log jam with prospects, but he looks legit, man. Last year he hit 290 and I think it was in AA, 22 home runs. Now he's killing it in spring. There's a chance he's probably going to be up this year. He looks really, really good.
Yeah, he's got the second most hits in spring training right now with 10, trailing only Eloy Jimenez's 12.
There's one young guy that I'm pretty stoked to be seeing playing. You might have heard of Mike Trout. He's actually finally ramped up and playing in spring. I know that's funny. Haha, joke. He actually hit a grand slam today. Been given the green light to steal bases again. I think he's had a steal yesterday. Might have added one today. Mike Trout looks ramped up pretty well. And wouldn't it be something to get the first healthy season really of good production for Mike Trout? And then it's the year after Tony's gone and the Angels still don't have much to play for. Would just be just another feather in the cap of Mike Trout's extremely unlucky career of excellence. But seeing the new faces in new places is always kind of interesting too. Drop something. That's what it sounded like.
I dinged my phone against my coffee cup. I'm starting an update, so hopefully it'll be done by the time we're done recording.
Way to go, boss. What's been the weirdest one for you for the new faces, new places?
I don't know. There's something about having played so much MLB The Show that seeing players in other uniforms doesn't
it
weird me out as much.
Phase you as bad.
Yeah, unless it's a guy who spent the entirety of his career somewhere and then 15 years somewhere and then goes to another team. So Brandon Crawford was probably the weirdest one for me.
One's tough.
Juan Soto looks great in pinstripes. There are players that do look weird in pinstripes. I would say Verdugo is one of them, but Soto just looks like he was born to be a Yankee. So fingers crossed he doesn't stay there forever. But yeah, it's always fun to see players wear their new uniforms. Seeing Ohtani in the Dodgers uniform is disgusting.
Sucks. Yeah, the one that's weird for me, and we'll actually talk about this one later, is Chris Sale. I don't know why, even it's the same colors with Boston. I also think it's because he's wearing a different number. I don't know if you've seen Sale now, but he's wearing a different number. It's just weird to see Sale. One, because he hasn't thrown a whole lot, and now it's just in a completely different place with a different number. It's hey, it's almost hey, I remember that guy. It's where's he been? So that was kind of a weird one. We'll get to that later. But you talked about Brandon Crawford. That one's a super weird one for me, seeing as he's been with the Giants for so long over there on that left side of the infield. And we can talk about somebody that's going to be over there now for the next potentially 3 years. And it's Matt Chapman, who signed a 3-year deal worth $54 million, pretty reminiscent of the Cody Bellinger deal. It's got 2 opt-outs in there as well. Matt Chapman, we called it. Well, I did, at least anyway. You were closer on the money figure. So I'm still losing in our prediction competition. But Matt Chapman signed with the Giants. And I think that's a huge roster fit, extremely obvious, and goes back to the Bay Area, obviously formerly the Oakland Athletics. But how stoked are you, Mr. Giants fan?
I'm pumped. Yeah, I was not really expecting it, especially the night that it happened. I was not expecting it at all. So it was great news to see. But I think I had been talking about the potential of the Giants signing him for the last few weeks or so, just considering where they were at as a team and who they had been signing. It just felt like if they didn't pull off a Matt Chapman signing, it would really just, it would almost feel like they didn't put the finishing touches on what has now, in my opinion, been a really, really good offseason. Adding Soler and stuff made the Giants very not great at defense, and very dependent on our bats, which didn't seem to live up to the standards that maybe other teams have set. But adding Chapman to an infield and really boosts the defense. And then also he's a great hitter. Last year he was really unlucky. He was the only player with at least 500 plate appearances and a barrel rate over 11% to hit fewer than 20 home runs, and he hit 17, and his barrel rate was like over 16%. Like he was top 10 in baseball in barrel rate. This is Matt Chapman, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in San Francisco. And if you're worried about like the money that we've committed to him as a Giants fan, if you're worried about the Giants not being able to spend anymore, I think they should be fine because he can opt out whenever. So that it allows flexibility for both him and the Giants front office. And now, just considering with the injuries we've seen to their rotation, namely Tristan Beck having to get vascular surgery and then Sean Helly going down with a sprained elbow, that's like most of our depth for the starting rotation right now, which was pretty shallow to begin with, considering we were waiting on like Alex Cobb and Robbie Ray to return. So now I feel like a Blake Snell signing is on the horizon, and that would put them right up with like top 3 off seasons in baseball this year. And I already think they're pretty close to that. But I think this is just a perfect addition to the team. He fits so perfectly there, and he returns to his old manager, Bob Melvin.
Yeah, I think that one fits pretty easy for me too, especially seeing how like the Boris guys have signed. And honestly, of the 2 left, it's just Jormont and it's just Snell. It feels like Jormont's the only one that's got a chance to really sign one of the longer term deals now. For me, Snell always felt like I predicted it because I went along with their predictions or whatever. Oh, he's going to get a 7-year deal. He's going to get an 8-year deal. To me, like a long-term deal for Snell like that for huge money was like always the biggest hard pass in the world. At least in my opinion. And I think that, seeing the Chapman deal, 3 years, bunch of opt-outs, Bellinger, 3 years, bunch of opt-outs, give Snell a deal like that. Give him a 1-year huge prove it, or give him a 3-year opt-out laden deal like that with a team that can contend. I think that's a good situation for him. He'd be in a pitcher's park. He'd be with his old manager. It's a lot of factors that would help him, and it's been in the same division he's been pitching in. I'm always a huge nerd about that. I think that guys typically like to stay in division if given the opportunity to. That fits so well. I think that could definitely happen, and I already love their offseason. I mean, they've had Chapman, Jung-Hoo Lee, Soler. I love Soler. Robbie Ray and Jordan Hicks are their big ones that they've added, and I think that's pretty stout already. Add Snell to that, and I wouldn't even call it top 3. I would probably call it top 1 in my opinion. I would.
Whoa, yeah,
I would really. Well, in terms of accomplishing things to bring your team up a level, the Dodgers are great. They've added 2 huge stars. The Giants would go into contention still in the division and definitely near the top of the wild card after being down in the doldrums where you don't want to be in professional sports, because we talk about that the last like 3 podcasts. If you're around 500, you're in hell. That's like you're in hell, not even purgatory. Like that's where you don't want to be. It sucks. So I think these moves put them into heavy wild card contention near the top already. Snell like that, you probably have a chance to compete for the division. I really like that idea.
Who's got the 3rd best offseason if it's, I don't know, consensus Dodgers Giants in the top 3?
It's difficult to say. I honestly I like the Yankees, honestly, just because they've added Soto, and adding Juan Soto to your baseball team is extremely solid.
Bro, you got to be a homer here.
I would probably put the Cubs there. I really would, with Bellinger and with Imanaga, especially for the deals that they got them for. Plus Hector Neris, I mean, it's the same deal. You brought your team up a level. I think Imanaga, he struggled a little bit in his first start. That's mainly because he gave a home run. He looks nasty. The stuff is very clear. Hector Neris, I really like him as a reliever, and then Cody Bellinger still adds to their offense. Kind of brings it back to where it was previously. Hopefully we can get steps up from Morel and other guys. But
it's like we got It's like we got consolation prizes for missing out on Ohtani. They were just like, "Oh, okay, you guys run your podcast together, and we'll make sure your teams have good off season, so you can sort of forget about Ohtani going to the Dodgers." But yeah, this has definitely helped, get rid of my sadness that really was profound throughout the off season.
Definitely so. Somebody who is definitely not experiencing profound sadness is Zach Wheeler, one of the most underrated pitchers in the game. Got a huge extension from the Phillies, obviously, because that's who he pitches for. That's how you have to get an extension. They extended him for 3 years, worth $126 million. If you are as plugged into baseball as we are, if you are not, Zach Wheeler is one of the top 5 starters in baseball and has been for the last, honestly, 3-4 years. And it still feels like he's not getting his due until now. The guy really deserves this extension almost more than most starters in the league. He's very quietly posted his last 3 seasons, 7.2 F4, 4.2 F4 in a down year, really, and then 5.9 F4 last year. He's extremely good. One of the best in the game is Zach Wheeler. So it's good to see him being duly rewarded with his extension.
Yeah, no, and he was rewarded handsomely because the AAV for that 3-year, $126 million deal is the highest AAV ever for an extension.
Yeah, I'm really kind of cool with that too. And I think I sort of like the high AAV short-term deals because it's one, you're rewarding your guy. Cool. It's still like the same-ish if you're going to give them a longer-term extension worth a little less money. But I honestly think there's less risk because, all right, you're paying this money. If he sucks the next, for whatever reason, if Zach Wheeler just sucks after this year, he's good this year, next 2, he just falls off a cliff. He just forgets how to throw a baseball. It's not that bad. It's not like
they have him for the next 3 years after this year, 25 through 27.
Oh, yeah.
And
so, it's still not the biggest deal in the world.
He'll be 35, 36, and 37 in those seasons. So I feel like this is a deal that has precedent from Verlander and Scherzer, and neither of those deals really went too well. But they were much older.
That is true. You can draw weird parallels too, where a lot of the numbers so far through their Phillies careers, Zach Wheeler's parallels are extremely close to Roy Halladay's. His numbers look almost for a lot of them, they're better. He's got a better ERA plus, higher strikeout percentage. Roy Halladay, not so much. He's walked less batters in less innings. So he's been a real star for them that just doesn't get the credit. And I think he's still going to be good. Obviously, he's just 33, which is still youngish in the grand scheme of things. He could be really good for a long time. Like you said, those other long-term extensions or long-term contracts for Verlander and Scherzer, they're a lot older. I think there's less risk here with Zach Wheeler for him to just continue what he's been doing, which what he's been doing is top 5 starter stuff. Guy's really good.
Yeah, super underrated. Been one of my favorite pitchers over the last few years. I've had him on my fantasy team for each of the last 3 seasons. So that shows how much I believe in Zach Wheeler every single year. And now I hope he finally gets the recognition as one of the highest paid players in baseball. He's ranked pretty highly on my boss's rankings over at Pitcher List too. So Zach Wheeler, clearly one of the best pitchers in baseball, has been one of the most reliable, maybe the most reliable pitcher across the last 3 years. And now I think he's finally getting his due. And it's pretty awesome because this is a former Giants prospect. Yay. Glad to see him succeed somewhere else. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Do you remember the trade that the Giants made to give up Zach Wheeler to the Mets?
No, I do not.
Carlos Beltran.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, they got Carlos Beltran for a year. They gave up Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler sort of never lived up to his potential in New York, went to Philly, had success in 2020, but didn't figure out the strikeout stuff. And then 2021 through 2023, just an absolutely incredible run to earn him this very, very lucrative contract.
That Mets like dream rotation what if is like one of the craziest things from the
What,
last
the
10 years of baseball.
Matt
Yeah.
Harvey, DeGrom,
Matt Harvey,
Syndergaard,
DeGrom, Syndergaard, and Zach
Wheeler,
Wheeler all in the same rotation, and then Bartolo Colon's just there.
or
Just
Steven Matz, maybe.
Well, maybe maybe a little lower.
Kodai Senga.
Yeah. Did you actually know that Zach Wheeler is the owner of the lowest career postseason WHIP of all time of any starter
Yep,
with
he's
minimum
better
40
than
innings?
Mariano Rivera.
Yep, and Sandy Koufax. So it's
pretty legendary.
Pretty crazy. We'll talk more about his Phillies later, but now we're going to talk about our NL East offseason review and give our grades because we've been doing this podcast after podcast. Last week we did the AL East.
AL West.
AL West. We did the AL East a couple podcasts ago where we kind of trashed that division because most of their off seasons were not so hot. Yep. And I think there might be a little bit of a different tune for a few of the ones from this division. So we're going to start with the NL East, starting with the Atlanta Braves. We can first go over the additions, subtractions, and then any extensions like we've been doing. I will hand that over to you to run down our Braves list. Mr.
Sure.
Braves
yeah. Yep. Repping the Braves. First time wearing this hat. Literally just took off all the stickers. But yeah, they had a pretty busy offseason. They got most of their work done early, but they added Joe Jimenez, who was more of a return, more of a neutral move, but I'll consider it an addition. They also got Aaron Bummer, Reynaldo Lopez, Jared Kelnick, David Fletcher, Chris Sale, and Luis Guillorme. They subtracted Kevin Pillar, Jesse Chavez, Eddie Rosario, Michael Tonkin, Kirby Yates, Jared Schuster, Nicky Lopez, Mike Soroka, Kyle Wright, Nick Anderson, and Vaughn Grissom. But they also extended both Pierce Johnson and Chris Sale. That was after acquiring him from the Red Sox. Pretty busy offseason. A lot of it happened early. Some interesting trades in here, and most of their free agent signings, or all of their free agent signings, were geared towards reinforcing their bullpen that lost Kirby Yates and Michael Tonkin and Jesse Chavez and Nick Anderson via trade.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty fond of this this offseason. Like you said, they got a lot of their moves done early, but my big thing is like they added a lot of pieces to replace guys, and I think there was a very clear plan. Like, okay, well, they lost Eddie Rosario, they replaced him with Jared Kelnick, and while that is a move that you can look at with a specific mindset, I'm going to try to be more positive because there's not been a whole lot about Kelnick's young career so far to be positive about. Hasn't really lived up to, the top 10 prospect potential, I think. But you're replacing Eddie Rosario with a controllable Jared Kelnick. Good. A lot of the guys they lost too, like Jared Schuster, Nicky Lopez, Mike Soroka, Kyle Wright, like Nick Anderson, like even Michael like even guys like that. Like, are you really upset about losing those guys if you're the Braves?
Not at all. Not if you're getting the guys that they got.
Not if you're getting the guys that they got. Like the only one of the subtractions that I would be like, all right, that kind of sucks that they lost him is Vaughn Grissom. But even then, Vaughn Grissom struggled a little bit last year. He could be good, and I like Vaughn Grissom, but
they just don't have really any room for him.
They don't have the room for him. And they kind of got Chris Sale for it. So I think I'm pretty stoked with that. Sale, if you haven't watched any of his like outings from spring training so far, he looks back to form. He looks really disgusting. The slider, obviously, extremely good. It's Chris Sale. I think his velo has kind of returned a little bit. If they can get remotely healthy innings from Chris Sale, this is a win by a mile. I'm a huge fan of this offseason. I even like replacing guys like Jesse Chavez, who even in his few spring training appearances, he looks like ass.
He's 40 years old.
Yeah, and say he's a 40-year-old reliever. Like, it's hard to be like, oh yeah, that guy sucks. He does suck, but he should suck. That's the thing. Pierce Johnson, they extended him. I think the guy's really good. Joe Jimenez, same thing. Aaron Bummer, nasty. Dave Fletcher, who really gives a shit. Jared Kelnick, he sucks. He's been really bad in spring training so far, but there's a grain of salt with that. Jared Kelnick's big issue, strikes out all the time. Only 3 Ks so far in spring. So, I mean,
but no hits.
He has 1 hit. Thank you very much. But they've been retooling his swing. They've been retooling his swing a lot. With the
hype's renewed for me.
I'm fine with it. They don't need to rely that much on him. His his spring is rough. His spring is pretty terrible so far.
Hey,
But
get it out of the way early.
Get it out of the way early. If they can make him an everyday player, I think this is a win for them. He's controllable. If he can be right around Eddie Rosario's production, which was league average. That guy was ass last year. Just get league average production out of Jared Kelenic. They're retooling his swing, working on the K rate, working on him against lefties as well. So they're trying to do that for him. I'm so fine with this. He can be bad. Just fix it now and kind of have him be ready for the season. I'm stoked with their offseason. I can't quite give it an A. It just doesn't really have the X factor. But since we're not doing B pluses, I'd have to give it a B. If this one would feel like a very clear B plus for me.
Yeah.
We're just not going to do that. I'm going to go with B, and it's on the definite high side of B for me.
Yep, that's where I am too. I feel like with the Kelenic edition, there's so much more ceiling. And if you're replacing a guy like Eddie Rosario, he just signed a minor league deal with the Nationals.
Yeah, that's the thing is the ceiling for Kelenic is still he's a top 10 prospect ceiling. The guy's 24. He's not done. He's controllable, and they're fine. They're so fine with that. If he just needs to be an everyday player, and they're fine. They're literally back where they're at. If he's better than that, oh my God, they beat the shit out of this offseason. That's perfect for them.
Well, even if he's not, even if he is either below replacement, he's absolutely terrible, or he needs to be platooned because he can't figure out his struggles versus lefties, it's not going to cost a lot to go and trade for an Eddie Rosario or sign a Kevin Pillar from free agency in June or whatever. There's going to be plenty of veterans that are replacement level guys that you can just throw in there because that's what you had before. So it's whatever you have here is going to be an improvement on what you had last year. Just don't put Marcell Ozuna in the outfield. That guy cannot field to save his life. But I do have to echo your sentiments on most everything here. I'm also going with a B for the Braves. They did a good job of addressing their bullpen, which is with the way that they built their team. Their bullpen is seems to be one of the worst areas on their team, and they have one of the best bullpens in baseball. It's crazy. And they only lost a couple veterans. I think Yates is probably the only one that is a difference maker there in the bullpen. Nick Anderson, I guess, can be a little bit, but when you bring Joe Jimenez back, you go trade for Aaron Bummer, who I think is one of the most underrated relievers in baseball because he really struggled last year, but his underlying metrics suggest he was very unlucky, and I'm sort of scared to see what he does for the Braves. And then Reynaldo Lopez, they're going to try to use him as a starter, which is weird because he's had so much success as a reliever. But in those cases, it's if they don't work out as a starter, then you just put him back in the bullpen, and then they're stretched out and they can go a couple innings until they're back down to the 1 inning guy that you need in the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. But I love what they did with their bullpen. I think it's an upgrade over last year when they had one of the best bullpens in baseball. And then it's the rest of the roster, you can't really do much. You get Kelenic to in the one spot on your starting lineup where it's there is a question mark left field, you go and get Kelenic, who's got some of the highest upside in all of baseball. And then in the rotation, you'll get Chris Sale to replace some guys who I feel are probably more sturdy, like Soroka and Kyle Wright and Jared Schuster. Chris Sale's got, I think, a higher ceiling than all of those guys, though he is at risk of just breaking in half at any moment. But on top of that, it's this is a team that was built off of pitching prospects, which, considering how the team turned out, that it's not what you would really expect because their lineup might be leagues better than the rotation. But this is a team that went down the opposite path of the Cubs and the Astros, who built around bats in the draft. The Braves built around starting pitching. So they have a ton of starting pitching depth of, replacement level guys in AAA that they can call up and just have pitch whenever, Dylan Dodd, etc. But yeah, I think they did a really good job. Like you said, it's missing that X factor to go all the way to A, but I think it's clearly a B and is verging on A. And those extensions make it even closer because, Pierce Johnson didn't really need to be extended, but, keeping him around is good. And obviously, they acquired Chris Sale, so of course they're going to extend him just like they have done with almost every other trade acquisition that they've had over the past couple of years.
Definitely. So we can talk about the Marlins next, who I believe are not going to have such a glowing indictment.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. They added through trade Vidal Brujan with the Tampa Bay Rays. They added also Nick Gordon through a trade with the Minnesota Twins, and they have one free agent addition, which is Tim Anderson. I think we talked about that. Was it either last podcast or the one previous? That was a relatively recent move. Their first free agent move of the offseason. Not great. They subtracted Joey Wendell, David Robertson, Yuli Gurriel, Jorge Soler, and Garrett Hampson, all leaving through free agency. And then the aforementioned Nick Gordon trade was a swap with Twins for Stephen Okert. No extensions to talk about. The Marlins, oh boy. Let's hear it from you first.
Yeah, I mean, I've been giving them shit all offseason, starting with them hiring somebody above their previous GM, Kim Ng, the first female GM in, I think, North American sports history, which is pretty wild. And then she left town. So now we are back to square one on that front, having women leading front offices. So that really sucks. And they really lost a lot of goodwill that they earned by making their first legitimate playoff entrance since in like 20 years. So that was not a great way to start off, and then to just remain quiet for the whole offseason. It was like the Vidal Brujan trade was all they had done up until February, and then they traded for Nick Gordon and signed Tim Anderson. And Tim Anderson deal was like, you got to do something. This roster is not going to live up to the expectations that they exceeded last year. And their shortstop was going to be filled by John Birdie. So getting anybody there probably would be an upgrade. So Tim Anderson, I think, is a solid signing, but then not having anything else to go along with that. Gordon and Brujan are both going to be bench utility guys that maybe platoon a little and have not really proven to be major league caliber, at least over full seasons. So not really anything big on the addition side, but they did lose some names that are, not really consequential either. I don't think Joey Wendell and Yuli Gurriel and Garrett Hampson are making any waves on the free agent market. But David Robertson is definitely a serviceable reliever. Jorge Soler is, one of the best home run hitters in all of baseball. And Stephen Okert is a very, very underrated southpaw reliever. And their bullpen has gotten a lot worse after being one of the best in baseball last year. The rotation continues to deal with injuries and is still very young and unproven. And their lineup would not scare many people. I was going to say me, but yeah, it would scare me to have to face Jake Berger and Josh Bell back to back. They would absolutely hit tanks off me. But either way, I think the Marlins absolutely failed this offseason because they made the playoffs last year. You got to go in. You got to go all in. You got to support this team, especially in this division, the way it is, how competitive it is, especially in 2024 with the Mets sort of taking a step back. This is your chance to sneak your way back into the playoff picture again through the wild card like they did last year. And you know what they did? Absolutely nothing. They got worse. And they also basically forced their GM out of town for no good reason. And all for them to do absolutely nothing. I'm giving the Marlins a big fat F for this failure of an offseason.
Yeah, I'm gonna completely and totally agree with that. They've added nothing. They've added Nick Gordon. Yeah, Nick Gordon last year really lit it up. 34 games, negative 0.4 FWAR, 30 WRC plus. Vidal Brujan's prospect star completely fallen. He's 26 now. He's a utility guy. Your guy's good when the big news about him is that he's gonna maybe make the roster on the Marlins, who are going to be probably the worst team in this division. And I really mean that. I genuinely think if the Nationals and their prospects are remotely decent, I think the Marlins are probably going to be the worst team in this division. I think.
Whoa, they have the Nationals.
Yeah, I genuinely think right now the Nationals are more appealing to watch anything about them than the Marlins. The Marlins are painfully boring. Braxton Garrett's not going to play to start the season. Your big addition is Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson sucks, man. Tim Anderson sucks. He sucked for a couple seasons now. He's terrible. The guy's a bum. Not a big fan of him. I just really don't particularly like him. I'm not a big fan of his at all. I don't really rate him as a player. I'm not a fan of Tim Anderson. I think that also, you've added nothing to your baseball team. Your team sucks, probably is worse than they were last year. And you ran off your GM, who I thought was doing a solid job. Like, you basically ran them out of town.
She got you to the playoffs.
You blew it. You super blew it. It's an F, F minus if we could do that.
Whoa. Worst off season?
One of them, yeah. One of them, if not the worst so far. They've done nothing. Like, you've added 2 bench utility guys and a bum to play shortstop. Your team sucks. There's nothing interesting about them. And honestly, you should feel bad. So, yeah, Marlins, you suck. Next team. We can talk about the Mets, who are potentially going to suck, but their offseason has been extremely interesting. They've added through free agency Luis Severino, Joey Wendell, Michael Tonkin, Jorge Lopez, Harrison Bader, Sean Manaea, Adam Ottavino, who I guess is a return, Shintaro Fujinami, and Jake Diekman through free agency. And then through trades, they've acquired Wade Miley and Tyrone Taylor. They've lost 3, though. So they've added all these names. They've lost 3 to free agency: Luis Guillorme, aforementioned, going to the Braves, Trevor Gott, and Carlos Carrasco. How are you feeling about the Mets?
They, I think, did what they set out to do. And what I think they set out to do was acquire a bunch of guys that they can trade to improve their team for 2025, which, when you have a goal that we've talked throughout this series about teams that go into the offseason without any sense of direction. And those are the teams that usually earn the lowest grades because they can't decide if they're rebuilding or, competing, and then they end up doing nothing, or doing sort of both in both directions and treading water, and it never ends up good. The Mets, while I wish they would be trying to compete every single year, considering how much money their owner has, the richest owner in all of baseball, I think with their supposed goal of taking 2024 off to go all in for 2025, they did that beautifully, because not only did they add enough players to this roster that I think it puts them on the fringes of the wild card, but they also added basically every single guy they added is somebody that could be traded and be useful at the deadline. Like, just starting with the pitchers, Luis Severino is a huge bounce back candidate. He's on a 1-year deal. If he bounces back, he's guaranteed to be traded, unless the Mets, of course, are in the playoff race. Wade Miley's sort of in the same situation. He's usually very reliable, and so that's a guy that can easily be traded. Sean Manaea is literally on like a 1-year or 2-year deal with an opt-out in between. So if he performs well, he's going to opt out. So they might as well trade him. And then all the relievers they got, you can always trade a reliever, especially when they're on 1-year deals. Ottavino, Fujinami, Diekman, Jorge Lopez, Michael Tonkin. You can trade all of those guys. And then even Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor and Joey Wendell sort of fit that same mold of guys that can fit about on any team. Harrison Bader, elite defensive center fielder. He doesn't really have to hit that much, and he can still fit on any team. Every team wants a guy that can just be a defensive replacement in the playoffs. Joey Wendell, utility player. He's reliable at a number of positions, and that's something you can rely on. And Tyrone Taylor, I think, has a little bit of potential and might have a chance of sticking with this team through 2025. But all that being said, they lost nobody. Trevor Gott is not anybody that they should be worried about. Carlos Carrasco signed a minor league deal and is probably almost 40. And Guillorme, while a fan favorite, is not somebody that's consequential. So I think this is going to be difficult, just considering this is not an offseason where it's like they are trying to compete or they're trying to sell. It's sort of a unique case that they're in. I'm giving them an A because they did exactly what they set out to do, and that was become better for 2025 by acquiring guys that they can trade in 2024. And if that was their intended goal, they did it just phenomenally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I misspoke earlier. They did not get Wade Miley. They actually acquired Adrian Hauser. Adrian Hauser was.
Why did I put Wade Miley?
I don't know.
Adrian Hauser sucks. Okay, never mind.
They're extremely
be off season. Be off season.
Be off season. That guy's a bum. They got. I also like A. I think they did set out to accomplish their goal, be better for 2025, with the upside of, hey, they can be pretty good for this season if it goes well. Everyone's kind of like down in their rotation. Is their rotation good right now? No, it's not. But is it the worst in baseball? No, it's not. There's not many great guys in there, but there's enough that I think are capable. I think Sean Manaea, with what he showed last year, I think he's penciled in as their third starter. I think he's got a lot of potential if he's the third starter. Quintana's a steady hand. Adrian Hauser sucks, but he will give you innings. Tyler McGill, I don't really know. But Luis Severino has like some reason to be excited for. Like the velocity's back up. He looked pretty good in the spring.
I think he's going to be fine.
I think he's going to be fine. Adrian Hauser has been bad in the spring, but his underlying numbers are actually pretty good.
He's always fine. Yeah.
He's mid. He's extremely mid. But if he's your five starter once Senga comes back, you're cool with that. Like you're cool with him being there. I'm pretty stoked with this. I'm also looking at like their like roster resource page. Their lineup looks kind of good. Like obviously the top end of it is just really solid until about 6, and then after that it's like, all right.
Don't count out DJ Stewart.
Well, DJ Stewart for me is just like I'll need to see it again. I just sort of need to see it again before I'm like, okay, this is good. And then you have your upside plays later. It's like, all right, Francisco Alvarez projected to hit 24 home runs. I think he could. Brett Beatty, I would like to see him take the next step. And then Harrison Bader hitting 9th. Like that guy's, I'm fine with Harrison Bader being there. I'm super cool with that. I like this. I like their offseason a lot. They've added pieces. If they suck, guess what? You got pieces to flip. They could make a play like a push for the wild card. It's another season that like, all right, well, the Mets, this is a good around about 500 for them because it's got upside and they'll most likely be able to make a push in free agency next year with a lot of pieces. I'm stoked with this. I would also probably give it an A just because they did accomplish the one goal that they had like better than most other teams. So I'm pretty happy with this one.
Consensus A for the Mets. Impressive.
Definitely. We can talk about the aforementioned with the Zach Wheeler extension, Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, they had a pretty quiet offseason in terms of the number of moves that they made. They re-signed Aaron Nola. They added Colby Allard, Spencer Turnbull, and Whit Merrifield, all of them via free agency. And then they lost Rhys Hoskins, Mike Lorenzen, and Craig Kimbrell via free agency. And as previously mentioned, they extended Zach Wheeler. This is a very, very quiet offseason for a team that was loud last offseason, in my opinion, getting Trey Turner and making it pretty deep into the playoffs once again. And I think this is a fine offseason. Like I have nothing against this. I think they solved the holes on the roster that they had. Their bullpen has become actually really good. So losing Kimbrell doesn't really matter that much. Bringing Nola back was honestly way bigger than it seems, considering like he's a returning guy, but if they had lost him, it would have been huge. Extending Zach Wheeler, I think is great, but it doesn't really like affect the team for this year. And I think losing Hoskins is fine, just considering they didn't even have him last year. They got Harper at first, so it's not like it's going to change their fortunes for the next year. And Whit Merrifield's, I think, just a great glue guy on a roster. That being said, it's not like it's not a offseason that really blows you away. I'm leaning C because they didn't do much. But that being said, there's not a lot that they could do considering their lineup's loaded. Their rotation's pretty solid, and they have the depth in the minor leagues to withstand injuries. And like I said, their bullpen has actually become surprisingly really good. So maybe like the depth guys with like Whit Merrifield and Turnbull and Allard, and then bringing Nola and back and extending Wheeler. Maybe that's really all they could do. Maybe I wish they would have gotten another starter to kick Taijuan Walker out of there, but I can't blame them because they have a lot of money owed to him. Maybe C is too harsh, honestly, because they did about all they can do. I'm gonna give them a B, but it's gonna be a lower B.
Yeah, I'm fine with a C for me. I mean, like they got Nola, which should theoretically put you back where you're at. That's my thing. It's like, did their team get a lot better? No, not really. Like they kept guys that they already had. They added Allard, who's going to be like a weird kind of swingman, multi-inning reliever sort of type. Spencer Turnbull actually on his deal looks nasty. He actually has one appearance so far. He went 2 innings and struck out 4, and they were all pretty ugly too. He embarrassed He embarrassed the guys he faced.
They're gonna
You can
make
look
him
at it.
into a deadly reliever. They've been really
Yeah,
good at that.
his Fangraphs page right now is extremely funny because his FIP is in the negatives.
Nice. Matt Brash did that once.
Yeah, Matt Brash is gnarly too, but he looks really good. I'm fine with this. They've added pieces to just kind of continue going. They extended Wheeler, really cool. Thanks for doing that. Kept Nola around, really good. You're pretty much exactly where you're at from the previous season. So I think I would give this a C on the high end. Probably not a B.
I think
maybe they'll still add something. I don't know, but
yeah,
I'm kind of good with their offseason. All they really needed to do was stay the course. It feels like they sort of got unlucky. Like they just kind of got cold at the wrong time last season because I thought I think we both kind of had them picked to get all the way, and they just it just didn't happen. You know, sometimes it's just like that. Sometimes you just get got, and they got. So I'm kind of cool with them not panicking and over adding and doing all these things in the offseason. I'm fine with it, but I think fine with it constitutes a C for me.
Sure. I think it just depends on where you grade them from what point is it like from last year to where they are now, or is it from the beginning of the offseason to where they are now? Because at the beginning of the offseason, this is a team that doesn't have Aaron Nola or Reese Hoskins or all the other guys that they lost. So that's sort of where I see it from. When a team re-signs somebody, it can sort of be underrated because of the fact that it's like, oh, well, they already had this guy. They're not getting any better. But it's like, yeah, but if they didn't re-sign him, then they're sort of screwing themselves because like now you're just worse than you even were last year. So I don't know. That's very subjective on where to begin grading a team, the beginning of the offseason or comparing them to the last season. I think if it's the former, where we're starting beginning of the offseason, it's a clear B. But if it's sort of like a mix, which is what I feel like we've been doing, a sort of like quasi beginning of the offseason, but also like how much better did they improve over last year, then it's probably a high C. But yeah, I can see how it can go both ways.
Yeah,
I was going both ways too.
The thing though is like all right, well, when they started the offseason, I'm not too concerned about Hoskins. It never felt like they were going to keep Hoskins. I think neither of us expected them to. We never predicted it. We didn't even get a chance though to try to predict Aaron Nola because he signed so early. He signed in like November 19th or like the 18th or whatever. So and it never felt like Nola was going to leave. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he'd end up somewhere like the Cardinals or something. For me, it never felt like Nola was going to leave. So for that reason, it's like, all right, well, their offseason, based on the start of it, if that's where you want to go, it's like, well, they had Nola like a weekend. So, like, we never really got a chance. Like, just sort of imagine that without Nola. Like, if that makes sense for me. I honestly, until this, I forgot that Nola was even an impending free agent because he was an impending free agent for so little time. He was a free agent for 45 minutes, and then they signed him up again. So, like, I feel like you could definitely go B if you want to look at it that way. Hoskins, I'm just not factoring in. So I think I'm still good with C, just based on that. That's just sort of how I'm seeing it.
No, that's totally fine.
We've got one more team to talk about, though, and it's the Nationals. I mentioned them earlier. I liked their offseason, but we can talk about who they've added first before we get to that point. They've added 4 free agents, Nick Senzel, Dylan Floro, Joey Gallo, and Jesse Winker. And then they subtracted 2 big ones, Carl Edwards Jr. and Dominic Smith. So the Nationals haven't really done a whole lot, but that's okay. It's okay.
It is because they were going to be bad anyway.
They're going to be bad. They didn't lose anyone of consequence because there's no one on that team of any consequence really to lose. But how's your outlook for the Nationals looking right now, based on what they've done and what they sort of have coming up?
It has not changed. They are still going to be bad. The guys that they added are not really going to move many needles. Like it's fun to give Gallo and Winker and Senzel a chance. All those guys have not been great recently, but have the abilities to bounce back. They also added Eddie Rosario today via a minor league deal. And that one really wasn't huge either. He probably makes the team, but it's not really going to push any needle movers, not many on this team. And I think this just, allows them to do what they did last year with Jeimer Candelario, is bring in a guy and hopefully he figures things out. And then you trade him and you just, keep building your prospect capital so that once you're ready to compete in probably 2 or 3 years, then they can really get it going. I think this team does have potential in the future to be good, just building around CJ Abrams and Lane Thomas, I guess. I think they still got a lot of work to do in terms of making sure all these prospects develop well and then enter the big leagues with a solid footing. But as of like where they stand and what they did this offseason, they didn't trade anybody. They didn't add anybody that's going to help towards the future. I mean, obviously, I did mention that like these guys are probably going to be trade candidates at some point, but these aren't guys that are like guaranteed to be traded. There's a shot that all of these guys continue to suck and then they don't get traded at all because nobody wants them on their teams. Dylan Floro, I think, has probably got a good shot at being traded, but like, what kind of prospects are you getting back for 2 months of Dylan Floro? So that being said, I think like I would probably go full F if they had not really signed anybody that I thought could be traded, but with the possibility of this quadruplet of players being traded, I give them a D. It's definitely not a C though, because they really didn't. They were very not busy, and then they also didn't really make their future brighter.
I'm going to be a little bit more positive. I think I'm going to be a little bit more positive with them. I like their because we talked about the Mets accomplishing their goal in their offseason in the Nationals. I think their goal this offseason was just to get more pieces to potentially try to flip, and that's what
they didn't do a good job at that.
Well, there weren't many to really try to get as reclamation projects
because the Mets got them all.
Well, the Mets got a few. The Mets got most of them, but the Nationals did what they could. I'm not going to hate on their offseason. And the main thing is like they got guys that aren't going to block anyone either. Like, all right, here's your thing too. All these guys are going to get traded or they're going to get thrown out the door. And here's why: because I don't think that Eddie Rosario one, for example, he's going to start most likely the season in left field. Okay, Lane Thomas. Sure, he's going to continue to get game time, probably in right somewhere. He's going to DH. Eventually, if Eddie Rosario is half decent, they're going to throw him out the door so James Wood can play. They're going to get James Wood more time in the minors, throw Eddie Rosario out, get him in. They're going to keep doing this and cycling through until they can kind of get all their guys up. I honestly think there's a chance that like these are just going to be placeholders. You get something for them, anything, literally anything, like, and just throw them out the door. And then you finally like start to blood in some of your youngsters. I think Joey Gallo still has some juice. He's just been in some weird situations last season, injury prone. Previous season, he was good with the Dodgers, sucked with the Yankees. Sort of a weird spot. I don't know. It's Gallo. You know what you're getting with Joey Gallo. Nick Senzel, I think, could be a decent player every day. He just has not really been afforded the opportunity to be an everyday player. Eddie Rosario is extremely mid. We already know what Eddie Rosario is. That's fine. Dylan Floro, he's a reliever. Everyone wants pieces like that are relievers that you can just flip at the deadline. It's fine. They lost nobody of any consequence. They lost 2 guys that are currently on minor league deals, both to the Cubs, funnily enough. The one thing that would honestly make their offseason a lot better is they didn't add anyone to the rotation. For me, if I was going to give anyone a multi-year deal or go for another reclamation project, if I were them, I would honestly be chasing one of the starters that's left. And you could even look at someone like Shelby Miller, who's been more of a swingman, more of a reliever type, if you wanted to try that with him. Mike Clevenger's one that almost nobody's going to touch, and for good reason. That guy's an asshole, but like you could get Mike Clevenger. He fits into your rotation. If he's half decent, you throw him away at the deadline because they can't develop pitching for anything and try to get something back for him. That's the one knock that I have against them. I honestly almost wanted to give it a B. Because yeah, I'm so serious. I'm going to give it a C. I'm going to give it a C. Look, We're talking about accomplishing their goal. They wanted to get anyone
signing Nick Senzel and Joey Gallo.
Look, they're bums. But if they strike gold again,
B. I give them a B because they signed bums.
Yes. Well, look, I'm looking at it from the Jeimer Candelario situation. That was the perfect situation for them. And
these guys are way below Jeimer Candelario level.
Are they though?
Yeah, Nick Senzel.
I'm not talking Nick Senzel.
Well, who are you talking about? There's only 3 other guys.
I'm talking about Gallo, man. I'm talking about Gallo.
One guy, one guy.
I'm talking about Gallo, and I like Winker. Winker's
on a minor league deal. He's not even on the 40-man roster.
He'll make it. They don't have anyone else that's going to take his spot. Like he'll end up there.
How good do you think Gallo was last year?
He sucked last year, but he was hurt a large
What do you
chunk of
think he
last year.
batted? What do you think his average was?
-4, probably. He
His
sucks, but
batting
still.
average. What do you think his batting
Yeah,
average was?
I already said it. -4,
That's
probably.
not a number. Give me a real guess.
He probably hit about 160.
177. A
I
year
was
after
close.
hitting 160.
I was
Like,
close.
and he's not a
Here's the
good
thing, though.
defender anymore. He was -6.5 defensive
Yeah,
WAR.
and he's most likely going to play first because they don't really have anyone to play first.
Oh
Like,
my God.
I'm cool with it because they got guys. Look, that's the thing though. They wanted guys to flip. They got guys that if they're half decent, they'll flip. If they're half decent, they'll flip.
For nothing is what I'm saying.
It's the Nationals. Nothing to them is gold, Jake. They are bad.
All right. Well, we can agree to disagree. At least you're not giving them a B. If you give them a B, I might kick you out of podcast.
I'm giving them a C, but it's about accomplishing their goal. The Mets got guys to sort of try to be good for this year. Fine. Mainly looking towards next year. The Nationals are just getting guys to continue moving this down the road. They didn't get anyone that's going to block anyone out. They got guys that are like, all right, Eddie Rosario, cool. You have a 105 WRC plus. That's the best we can get out of you. Please get out of here. Give us literally anything at all. They're getting guys that they can flip. Nick Senzel, I think, has a chance to be the best one of this one, which is saying so extremely little because for me, it feels like he could be a decent player. He could be a pretty solid player right around where about like the production Whit Merrifield's giving you, where it's like around about a league average WRC plus, like 102, and then he just plays every day at whatever position you tell him to. That's fine for me. That's a guy that you can keep or other teams would want that you could get something for. Like Joey Gallo, if Joey Gallo hits 177, whatever, but he hits 24 home runs like he's projected on roster resource, somebody will give up something for him.
I'm going to put out a poll. I need to see what the it's going to get like 29 votes, but it'll be a larger sample size than the two
I would give it a C. I'm not going to hate on their offseason because was it great? Was it great? No. Did you expect anything, Jake?
No. But I don't think we're grading off expectations. We're grading off direction.
Them not blowing. Yeah, this is a clear direction. They're at the early stages of a rebuild, about to have two guys that could be up either this year or next. James Wood probably this year. Dylan Cruz maybe late this year. Like, you're getting guys that aren't going to block anyone if you get literally anything of consequence out of anyone. All they need to do is get one of them to be a little bit better than league average, and they'll get something back out of it. That's all I'm caring about. I'm going to give them a C. I'm cool with it. I'm really not going to hate on the Nationals right now. Maybe I'm trying to be super optimistic for them, mainly because a lot of their prospects look good too. So them just getting guys to sort of supplement that, I would be a lot more stoked with this. I would be a lot more stoked with this if they did add someone to the rotation because it looks terrible. Like it looks super
filthy miserable. In a bad way.
Well, bro, Patrick Corbin is your 5 starter. That's what's killing me. You're expecting to trot out like Pat Corbin and Trevor Williams. If they got somebody that's not complete ass there, like, I don't know, go get Michael Lorenzen on a 1-year deal. Go get Mike Clevenger. I'll be stoked with that.
Yeah. That might push me to a C. If they get one more guy, I'll give them a C.
If they did that, that's what would put me to a B for them. If they got guys that's like, all right, a little bit better than this, the plan's there. It's just early rebuild stages. They're just getting guys to flip. So it's better than the Marlins. It's 100% better than the Marlins. I can't give it an F if that's the benchmark for an F. And I don't think a D for me is like you add in one guy. Like they're trying. They're trying to accomplish this goal. It's just a stupid goal. Like I'm going with C. I'm not hating on the Nationals right now.
All right. Well, let's recap the grades. The Braves, we gave a consensus B. The Mets got a consensus A. The Marlins got a consensus F. The Phillies got a mix between a B and a C. I gave them a B, gave them a C, but I think we were both so that it could go either way. And the Nationals, I gave them a D and you gave them a C. So a little bit of I think when it goes that way, you can sort of see it's like more of a D plus C minus situation. But you seem like you were leaning
That's
B
fair.
there.
Well, but, for me, if they added, I'll be fair. If they added a starter, I would be closer to B. I don't even know if that would get it to B. I'm not going to be super pessimistic about them. C minus is fair. We're just not doing that.
All right. Well, that wraps up the NL East NL West, NL East offseason review and grades. Go check out the previous 3 weeks to see the American League divisions that we reviewed and graded, and then tune in next week probably on Wednesday again as we review and grade the NL Central in the following week for the NL West. But sounds like it's time to bring in the closer. What do you think?
I think it's a good time to.
All right. This week, as always, we will break down a closer in his career to close out the podcast. John Axford had an 11-year career from 2009 to 2021, during which he pitched for the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Indians, the Pirates, the Rockies, the A's, the Blue Jays, and the Dodgers. He was drafted by the Mariners in the 7th round of the 2001 draft, but he did not sign because he wanted to be signed later. He was drafted by the Reds in the 42nd round of the 2005 draft. I think he just wanted to go to college. He went to Notre Dame, so that's probably pretty cool. But he didn't debut until September of 2009, where he debuted against the Cubs at the age of 26. He tossed 1 inning, allowed 1 hit and 1 earned run while walking 3 with 1 strikeout. And his brief debut in 2009 also included his first career save. But then he found immediate success in his first full season in 2010, taking over the closer role midway through the season as he took the closer job from the legendary Trevor Hoffman. That year, he pitched to a 2.48 ERA with 24 saves, and then he peaked in just his second full season in 2011. He set a career high with 73.2 innings pitched, a career best 1.95 ERA and 1.14 WHIP, both of those career bests, and a career high 46 saves, which led the National League, and he was the first Brewer since Raleigh Fingers to lead his league in saves. He earned the National League Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award, finished 9th in NL Cy Young Award voting, and 17th in National League MVP award voting. 2012 was also successful from a save standpoint. He had 35 saves, but he regressed in every other category except for strikeouts, career high 93 strikeouts, but he had a 4.67 ERA. That led to him being traded to the rival Cardinals at the following year's deadline in 2013. The change of scenery, though, got him back on track. The first half with the Brewers, 4.45 ERA. The second half, though, in St. Louis, 1.74 ERA. The following offseason would be his first offseason as a free agent, and he signed with the Indians to be their closer, but he lost the job pretty early to a closer committee. That year, he had a 3.92 ERA and added 10 saves. And then the following year, or what was it that year? It was the same year. Oh, I forgot to put the year in there. He was placed on waivers and subsequently claimed by the Pirates. That was the same year, and pitched to a 4.09 ERA. Axford then once again became a free agent and earned just a minor league deal pitching for the Rockies. He wasn't exceptional in the thin air of Colorado, but his stats were representative of the team that employed him. He had a 4.20 ERA. And 25 saves. His performance earned him a 2-year major league deal with the A's. His first season in Oakland was solid, 3.97 ERA and 3 saves. But by July of 2017, he was DFA'd. That year, he pitched to a 6.43 ERA, and he wouldn't catch on with another team until the following year, 2018, when he signed a minor league deal with the Blue Jays. He pitched to a 4.41 ERA that year, and then was traded at the deadline to the Dodgers. And, one of my favorite players, I guess, John Axford, because he was like, I'm on the Dodgers. Time to sabotage. 3.2 innings pitched, 17.18 ERA. He wasn't there for much, but he did his best to sabotage the Dodgers. So I'll forever be grateful for him doing that. But then he did make a surprising comeback in 2021 at the age of 38, as he returned to his original team, the Brewers, but he recorded just 1 out. And that would be the end of his career, a career in which he racked up 4 Baseball Reference WAR across 525 and 2/3 innings pitched with 589 strikeouts while pitching to a 3.90 ERA, a 1.42 WHIP, and recording 144 saves, which is good for 95th on the all-time saves leaderboard.
Shout out to the Axe Man. I remember his return was like super, super hyped up, and it was a really,
I
really
totally
cool
forgot
moment.
about him, and I was just like, what's going on?
Also pitched, didn't he pitch in the WBC also at like 42 for Canada or something like that?
Possibly.
I think he pitched to the WBC. I'm gonna have to look that up. But that's all we have for this edition of the Free Baseball Podcast. Join us again next week when we're going to talk about the NL Central, which will be really fun because I get to be a homer the entire time and hate on all the other teams. So you can follow me on my Twitter account where I'm going to hate on every other team that's not the Cubs at DVSBird. And you can hang out with Jake Crumpler, where he'll actually post informational stuff. Like that cool fact he had earlier about Matt Chapman, at Jake Crumpler. That's his name. Super easy. Figure that out. Also, make sure you check out the Athletes Hub at theathleteshub.org, and check out their Twitter account at Athletes Hub. I skipped over this, but I'm going to do it now. Follow Jake Crumpler again. Read all the stuff on the multitude of websites that he writes for, all like
pitcherlist.com and baseballhq.com. Yeah, I should have an article coming out this week for Pitcher List, and I'll always putting out stuff for Baseball HQ. And I'm now onto the weekly grind of the Independent podcast, which did make the Baseball Pods tournament for the best baseball podcast. It was our first year on there, and of course we got rates and barrels in the first round and got absolutely destroyed because Eno and DVR are legends. That podcast is really great, and Rick and I still got a lot to learn. I think we probably got like 15 votes or something total. It was like they got like 91% of the votes. They absolutely hosed us, but it was an honor to be on there nonetheless. So that's Independent is a podcast to check out. But yeah, I will be pumping out content all year long. So make sure to check me out on Twitter over at Pitcher List and on my personal website, crumplerbaseball.com, where you can find all of my work, including this podcast.
Definitely. So that's all we have for this time. Peace.